Another daily record COVID-19 deaths in Spain, the second worst affected country in the world, as Prime Minister introduces tough new measures to help an overwhelmed health system. France stages its largest evacuation of coronavirus patients to date from hospitals in the hard-hit east of the country, freeing up desperately needed intensive care units as the situation is expected to worsen in the coming days. And North Korea fires 2 suspected ballistic missiles into the sea between the peninsula and Japan, South Korea calling it very inappropriate at a time when the world is battling the global pandemic. Those are our top headlines this hour on France 24. I'm Alexander Orcott. Now, Spain has confirmed another 838 people have died from COVID-19, another daily record that takes its total above 6,500, while the suspected number of infections is now approaching 80,000. Spain has the second highest number of deaths from the virus after only Italy. And like Italy, the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has now ordered a halt to all non-essential activities. A desperate measure for a desperate time. Sarah Morris in Madrid has the latest.
Yesterday and the day before were also records. The health authorities nevertheless think there is some good news. They say that looking at the figures carefully, the rises in the number of those who have the virus are starting to curve off, starting to slow down. Fernando Simon, who's heading up this health emergency in Spain, said that if you look back about 10 days ago, the rise in the number of those infected was about 20 to 25% and has now fallen to about 9%. He said some regions may have even passed their peak in figures, but he said there has to be nevertheless considerable caution, and that the accident and intensive care wards could still be very saturated within a few days, because many of these patients that have to be admitted have to stay in the wards for some time before they can be released. The health authorities saying to people they must respect the restrictions on not leaving their homes because it is a crucial time. The Prime Minister said that he had to increase these measures and that non-essential workers would not be able to leave their homes. He particularly mentioned, for instance, workers on construction sites. All companies and workers are going to be waiting for his detail to see whether they'll be able to go to the office or the factory tomorrow, or whether there'll be one of the workers that has to stay at home until the 9th of April. We can expect, for instance, food production workers may be able to continue. Also, the makers of medical equipment, pharmaceutical equipment and telecoms equipment, but others will be told to stay home. The Prime Minister had resisted this move because he feared for a devastating effect on the Spanish economy. You'll remember in the last crisis, 1 in 4 workers were left unemployed, but nevertheless the Prime Minister, explaining this decision to the Spanish people, said that really these were sad and bitter hours. He said the virus is hitting us with extreme cruelty as the battle becomes more intense. It isn't the moment to let our guard down. It's time to intensify the fight.
Sarah Morris there with the latest on the situation in Spain. Meanwhile, this Sunday in France, the largest evacuation of coronavirus patients from hospitals in the nation's hard-hit east has been taking place to free up desperately needed intensive care units. Under fire for its coronavirus response, the government has also made several key announcements in a bid to show transparency and intensify the so-called war against the virus.
Day 12 of lockdown. Prime Minister Edouard Philippe held no punches as he addressed the French public about the path that lies ahead.
Le combat ne fait que commencer. Les 15 premiers jours d'avril seront difficiles, encore plus difficiles que les 15 jours qui viennent de s'écouler.
The Prime Minister was surrounded by doctors and scientists as he laid out the country's strategy. But even for them, many questions remain unanswered.
Parmi les questions que se posent beaucoup d'entre nous, c'est est-ce que le virus est présent dans l'environnement? Est-ce qu'il persiste en particulier longtemps dans l'air, sur les surfaces inertes, etc. Eh bien ça, on ne sait pas.
Saturday's objective was to remove the doubt that has taken hold of France. The task fell to Health Minister Olivier Véran, who announced concrete action starting with respirators.
Nous avons passé des commandes à tous les producteurs, et notamment un producteur français, Air Liquide, avec une commande qui porte sur plus de 1000 respirateurs supplémentaires. C'est à ce prix que nous pourrons passer le nombre de lits de réanimation équipés de 10 000 à 14 000. Pour la France,
Regarding the lack of protection for caregivers, he announced an order for 1 billion masks from abroad.
un pont aérien étroit et intensif entre la France et la Chine a été mis en place de manière à faciliter les entrées des masques sur le territoire.
The availability of rapid test kits is also expected to rise, increasing screening capacity in the process.
30 000 tests supplémentaires par jour au mois d'avril, 60 000 tests supplémentaires par jour au mois de mai et plus de 100 000 tests par jour au mois de juin.
The government now requires that retirement home support staff and healthcare workers be prioritized for testing.
Now, for more details on the situation here in France, we can now cross to Eric Vivier, Professor of Immunology at the hospitals of Marseille and a member of the National Academy of Medicine. Thanks for joining us. I'd first like to ask you about treatments for serious cases of COVID-19, particularly there's research being done in your city into the use of the anti-malaria drug chloroquine. How effective is that proving?
Okay, so first, let me remind everybody that there are 3 different stages in the disease, 3 different groups of people. The vast majority of infected individuals, fortunately, are asymptomatic or with a very benign disease. And this group represents 85% of the population, so this is very important. And then there are 2 other groups of patients. A group of patients which have to go to the ICU, intensive care unit, and another group of patients which are symptomatic but not yet in the ICU, and maybe some of them will never go to the ICU. So as for the treatment, there are unfortunately no specific treatments which has been proven to be efficient as I speak. Hopefully, we will be seeing some of these drugs, but they are not yet available. That said, there are many trials going on, and so the drug that you're mentioning, hydroxychloroquine, is one of them. But at the present, there are no sign of true efficacy of this drug, as I reminded you at first, 85% of the patient will actually recover spontaneously or through the immune defense from the virus infection.
Yeah, that low fatality rate is one thing to be thankful for. And we have been hearing about the concept of herd immunity, that if enough people catch this, it will result in people developing antibodies that will help them battle it later on. If you have already caught COVID-19, does that make you immune from catching it again?
Okay, so again, medicine is based on science. So those are studies which are carried out as I speak. The current concept is that indeed patients who have been suffering from COVID infection and have recovered have sufficient titers of antibodies to make them immune to a secondary infection. But this is not for sure. Those are thoughts based on what we know of viral infection and based also on recent data obtained in the primate. But this is indeed what we think will be going on, which is very good news because the end of the confinement will be extremely important for people having had virus infection or not.
Normally during any flu season, we see for vulnerable people in society, we have a jab, an injection to give them. How far away are we from getting a vaccine for this particular virus, do you think?
It's very difficult to say, but this is a period of months, roughly a year, before one can get an efficient vaccine against this virus. I would like to say that it's quite ironic that people have been very scared of having shots of any kind of vaccines, in particular in France, and now they are all claiming for having vaccine, which is a very good thing. I mean, vaccines are drugs, so they can have side effects, but they are still very effective against a variety of microbial disease. So hopefully we will have one against this coronavirus very soon.
Thank you very much for sparing us your time, Eric Vivier, Professor of Immunology at the Hospitals of Marseille. You must be very busy right now. We'll look forward to you speaking to you another time as this goes along as well. We'll now move on to North Korea, which has fired 2 suspected ballistic missiles into the sea, according to South Korea and Japan, continuing a streak of recent weapons launches. The projectiles flew about 230 kilometres at a maximum altitude of 30 kilometres, landing in the sea that separates the peninsula with Japan. The South Korean military describes the launches as very inappropriate at a time when the world is battling the coronavirus outbreak. Well, for more on this, I spoke a few minutes ago to our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert.
There's really little surprising about it. This type of testing, ballistic missile testing, is essentially hardwired, if you will, into the DNA of North Korea. And you might argue that a global pandemic gives all the more reason to a leader like Kim Jong-un to test it this time. And why? Because, look, even in less tumultuous times without a pandemic, these type of tests are often aimed as much at an internal audience, a domestic audience, as at the outside world, and basically trying to project an image of Kim Jong-un as a leader solidly in control, in command of his nation. It's a way of sort of boosting morale, uniting the nation, and showing that he can stand up not just to the great enemy, the United States, as he sees it, but also that he has control of this pandemic. So it's a way of sort of battening down the hatches, showing the nation that at this time, when North Korea, the rest of the world are sort of fighting this pandemic, that he is very much in control. And I just might point out that these tests, in and of themselves, nothing new. These are really the 4th tests this month. These are the 8th and 9th missiles that were fired this month alone in the 4th round of testing. Now, they're short-range, small-fire ballistic missiles. We're not talking nuclear-tipped anything, but still sending a very firm message. And let's just remind our viewers that Kim Jong-un he resumed missile testing back in May last year, 2019, 3 months after the collapse of previous talks with Donald Trump in Vietnam, when the two fell out over sanctions relief in exchange for so-called denuclearization. So Kim Jong-un has been hard at work missile testing. By one estimate, more missile tests this month alone. This is the most missile tests he's ever conducted in a single month. So business as usual for North Korea, and perhaps even more so in the face of this pandemic.
What is the current situation with the coronavirus in North Korea? Is it possible for us to know?
Well, the easy answer to that is no, it's not possible for us to know, because obviously information is anything but crystal clear when it comes to North Korea, not just on pandemics, but just about any topic. That said, officially, if you ask North Koreans, they are officially denying that there is a single case, not one confirmed case of coronavirus in the entire northern part of the peninsula, something which the rest of the world finds very hard to believe, especially given the very, very difficult situation that its neighbor to the south, South Korea, has been up against, and only now is managing to flatten the curve. Look, the North doesn't deny that it's in a campaign to try to stamp out this virus. It's just denying that it has any cases itself. And the northern officials have said in Korea that this is a matter of national existence. So officially, yes, there is a campaign on in North Korea to prevent coronavirus from spreading among the population. But then again, just as officially, there are no confirmed cases, according to North Koreans. So take those statistics as you will. But as I said, most public health experts would say that it would be highly unusual if, given the situation we've seen in South Korea, there were absolutely the North had managed to hermetically seal itself against any cases. More likely, either the North is hiding something, or there are quite a few cases where they just don't have the testing capability or the willingness and the wherewithal to report that information accurately and transparently.
Now, finally, with half the world's population on lockdown, it's turned many of the normally bustling streets in major cities into ghost towns with very few pedestrians or cars. We'll leave you with some pictures recorded by France 24's journalist Yuka Roya as she made her way into work today along the deserted streets of Paris. Enjoy these and stay tuned to France 24.